What if the thing that keeps you numb to your own origin is not outside you, but a slow, calcifying pressure that turns living sensation into institutional habit? The phrase I want you to carry with you is simple: spiritual calcification. It names a process: soft perception becoming rigid, curiosity becoming doctrine, intimacy with the source becoming an accepted deadness. And there is an old, overlooked stream of teaching that calls this by name and, more disturbingly, tells you how to check whether that hardening has already begun in you. That material is part of the Gnostic corpus discovered at Nag Hammadi and includes texts like the Gospel of Philip. Those writings are not part of the canonical scriptures of most traditions. They belong to a particular interpretive lineage. Still, they offer a language for something many seekers feel: the sense that the inner life can petrify unless it is remembered and worked. Before anything else, if this idea lands heavy, breathe. This exploration is meant to be practical and gentle. If at any point you feel anxious or uncomfortable, stop and rest. This is an optional, non-invasive practice intended for personal reflection, not diagnosis or replacement for professional care. To make sense of what follows, I need to give you 3 short words that most of these texts use as a map: monad, demiurge, archontes. Monad names the primordial source, the unfragmented origin from which sparks of consciousness are said to have come. Imagine a single bright center that, by some account, releases fragments of itself into being. The demiurge is named as a secondary craftsman, not identical with that source, a builder who fashions the visible world and, in some tellings, creates limits that entrap those original sparks. Archontes are the intermediaries, patterns of influence, or intelligences that maintain confusion. Clouds over perception, habitual narratives, voices that keep you looking outward for authority rather than inward for recognition. All of this might sound speculative. It is. Frame these words as the vocabulary of a tradition that noticed how living contact with origin can calcify into structures that serve preservation rather than awakening. Spiritual calcification, then, is the slow ossification of the inner senses. How rituals, institutions, and fear can turn fluid, knowing into rigid belief. That's the problem the old teachers were trying to diagnose: a living connection getting sealed off by systems of control, habit, and forgetfulness. Now here's the part that most people find astonishing. According to the same traditions, there are somatic reminders, 3 subtle, non-medical marks of experience, where the memory of origin tends to leave an echo if it has not been entirely sealed. These are not diagnostic in the clinical sense. They are reported as felt presences, tactile or energetic impressions that some people notice when they turn inward. If you are curious, you can check for them yourself. Do this gently. If anything hurts or causes distress, stop. Begin by settling upright in a chair or standing with your feet grounding you. Take a few slow breaths, notice the way the air moves in and out, and set an intention simply to observe. The first place to check is at the base of the skull, where the neck meets the head. Place the flat pads of both hands there, lightly, without pressing. Do not probe. Allow your hands to rest as if supporting a feathered crown. Pay attention to sensations: a subtle warmth, a softness, an impression of depth, or an almost magnetized feeling that draws inward. Traditions call this the mark of origin, an echo of where the spark first remembers its source. For some, it will be a faint tingling. For others, a sense of release or a tiny loosening behind the eyes. For many, nothing dramatic happens at all. That absence does not mean the practice failed. It means the terrain is different for you. Notice, without judgment. Next, bring your attention to the outside edge of your left hand, the little finger side where wrist begins. Place your right hand gently along that lateral line, again softly, as if you're touching the seam of a garment. This zone is often described as the mark of perception. People report a delicate sensitivity here, a crispness in awareness, a micro-opening that feels like the widening of a sightline inside the body. You might sense a faint pressure, or a tingling that rises toward the fingers, or an inner noticeability when you shift your attention. Breathe with it. Don't force it. The aim is to see whether there is a lived sense of perception that resists the numbing effect of calcification. Finally, rest the flat of your hand over the upper chest, just above the sternum, where the voice of self and the center of intention often meet. This is described as the mark of command, the place that holds a subtle authorization to act from interior truth. Lay your hand here lightly and feel for a steadiness, a small tightening that is not alarm, but a sense of presence, or a soft availability. Something like a door that is not fully closed. Some will experience nothing more than a warmness of attention. Again, non-invasive, non-judgmental, and relaxed. As you check each place, keep saying to yourself, I am observing. I am not proving anything to anyone. Let the sensations be what they are. These are subjective signposts, not medical facts. Traditions use them as a way to trust personal anamnesis, recollection, over second-hand authority. If any of this tempts you into compulsive checking, step away. One careful practice is enough to inform you for now. The intention is to loosen calcification, not to create obsession. Expect resistance. The most immediate and predictable reaction will be mental. A cascade of doubt, ridicule, rationalization, or an anxious search for proof. The Gnostic writers frame these responses as archontic interference, patterns that defend the calcified structure by sowing confusion and self-derision. You will hear the voice that says, "It's all imagination," or "You're being foolish," or "This is dangerous." Don't argue with that voice. Notice it as a pattern and let it pass. Watching the resistance without engaging it is a form of decalcification in itself. You are refusing to feed that mechanism by arguing from its terms. If doubt arises as a torrent, breathe and return to the body. Label it internally, thought, that's the archontic pattern, and place your attention back at one of the marks, gently. The tradition sometimes suggests that the presence of doubt is paradoxically a form of confirmation. The system is reacting because something in you has started to strain the calcified boundaries. That's a subtle claim, treated as interpretive rather than definitive. The point is pragmatic. Don't let discrediting thoughts become a reason to abandon your inner verification. Observe and maintain compassionate curiosity. When you feel steady, there is a simple activation you can say aloud. Treat it as an affirmation, an authorized claim about your interior state, rather than a magic incantation. Say, in your own voice, with clarity, I recognize my origin, I activate my perception, I declare my command. Speak it once, then again if you feel called. Allow the words to land in the places you just checked. Notice whether anything shifts in texture, an easing, a small alignment, a feeling of inner permission. Many people find that speaking aloud anchors an internal reorientation more effectively than thought alone. Still, do not expect spectacular immediate transformation. This is a symbolic practice meant to soften hardened pathways over time. Remember, this activation is a tool of remembering. Spiritual calcification works by fossilizing routines, by replacing the living question, "Who am I?" with prepackaged answers. The declaration is a reassertion of inner jurisdiction. You are naming a lineage that you feel connected to and authorizing your own perception. It is modest in claim and radical in heart. It insists that you are entitled to verify your own experience. A few practical cautions. Do not substitute this for professional psychological or medical help if you are struggling. If the practice provokes anxiety, dissociation, or intense emotional reaction, pause and seek appropriate support. Do not use this as a method of proving superiority or as grounds for judgment of others. Some people will resonate with these symbols, others will not. Presence is primary. sensation is personal. There is also a historical humility to hold. The Nag Hammadi library and texts like the Gospel of Philip are invaluable for understanding certain currents of early spiritual thought, but scholars disagree about their authorship, dating, and theological import. They present one interpretive lens among many. When I describe archontes or demiurge, I am giving you that lens to make sense of a particular type of inner experience. You do not need to accept the cosmology wholesale to find the practice useful. Think of it as a map that might illuminate certain contours of your interior life. If you're wondering what comes next after this first verification, the path is not dramatic. Decalcification tends to be slow, cumulative, and relational. It requires repeated attention, small, honest acts, speaking truth when conformity tempts you, choosing presence over autopilot, making room for the memory of origin in ordinary moments. Community helps. Isolation is a common byproduct of awakening. Once your perception shifts, many mainstream structures will feel less nourishing. That is not a reason to retreat into vanity. It's a reason to find others who are practicing the same decalcifying work. People who will hold the paradox of radical interiority and ordinary humility. If this exploration is landing for you, stay with me on this channel. There will be more practical, gentle activations, and deeper contextual explorations of these texts. And if you felt something even faintly, leave a comment with the single word, recognition. It helps a scattered community find one another without turning this into a performance. Subscribe if you want to receive future practices that take a careful, embodied approach to remembering. Before we close, let me be unambiguous about limits. I am not promising that saying a sentence aloud will grant you invulnerability, supernatural power, or instant mastery over life. I am not recommending self-diagnosis of any medical condition, and I explicitly caution against compulsive checking. The marks, as described in the tradition, are invitations to memory, not certificates of worth. If you do not feel anything during the checks, that does not mean you are lesser or that the practice failed. Some paths require different keys. There is one more idea I want to leave with you regarding calcification. Institutions and systems often preserve by ossifying. They protect their identity by turning living questions into settled answers. Decalcification is not a call to tear down all structure. It is a call to allow structures to be permeable, to breathe, to be accountable to the living source within. The activation we practiced is a small, humble muscle in that larger work. It helps you reclaim a measure of sovereignty over your interior life without falling into rash individualism. If you decide to continue, do so with patience and discernment. Revisit the 3 places from time to time: base of the skull, lateral hand, above the sternum, and practice the declaration as an affirmation of your interior authority. Keep notes if that helps. What shifted? What resisted? What stayed the same? Over time, patterns become clearer. If you find community around these practices, test claims gently and keep compassion central. Remember that the archontic patterns the tradition describes can also be mirrored in woundedness, fear, and legitimate social pressures. Use discrimination. This conversation is an invitation to wakefulness, not to immediate certainty. The dark truth about spiritual calcification is that it can be invisible until you try to move, until you attempt to remember, and the defenses kick in. Yet that very defense is evidence that something in you is stirring. Stay with curiosity, stay with compassion, and, when you are ready, say the words. I recognize my origin. I activate my perception. I declare my command. Let them be a small ceremonial loosen, an unsealing of a hinge that, when moved gently again and again, allows light to come through where there was once only stone. If this resonated, leave recognition below so others searching quietly can find a signal. Subscribe for the next session where we will explore simple somatic practices that support ongoing decalcification. How to tend presence in daily rituals, how to recognize patterned resistance without feeding it, and how to form a humble, grounded community of practice. Thank you for listening. Take a few steady breaths, rest your hands if you use them, and go gently,